the last lap, it seems, of this stage of the journey. Nevertheless, O Lord, it is we need you just as much as we needed you when we began. Now, Father, we ask for your divine blessing on this day. Please step into this place with us as you fill us, as you move us, as you enable us to think and to reflect. We pray and ask that all that we say and do today would be to the honor, the glory, and the name of Jesus the Christ. Let us all say amen. Amen. Please be seated.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're on our last day of this conference, but not the last day of GCSCORED Caribbean, GCSCORED movement, as somebody described it last night at our cultural event. For those of you who missed it, you missed it. It was a blast. We had our own in-house comedian, none other than Mrs. Margaret Sampson Brown. We had a wonderful time, and we saw a diversity in talent, Trinidad talent, displayed by young as well as not as young, and so we are grateful for that. What I want to talk about just for a few minutes is where do we go from here? GCSCORED has a strategic plan that we've had in place from 2013, and it goes until 2020. Part of that plan is to have a conference, a GCSCORED conference, in collaboration with other organizations every 2 years. So our next conference is scheduled for 2017. Now, you have some yellow forms on your table. Those are the conference, GCSCORED conference satisfaction survey, or the overall conference evaluation. And I believe somewhere on that questionnaire is the question of where would you like to have this conference next? I've spoken with Guyana, I've spoken with Grenada and Trinidad, and there is a strong desire for the conference to be in all of those places. Because we are a research organization, we will use your responses on that yellow form to help us determine where the conference will be next. So we don't have that information yet, as you can tell, because it's going to be included in your survey responses. But that is going to help us, among other things, determine where the conference is going to be next. When we developed our strategic plan, when the GCSCORED board developed its strategic plan in 2013, we projected that in 2017, our next conference will be in Ghana. And then in 2019, we were going to be having our conference in Brunei. But after going through the process of planning this conference, we realized that, and so it would go, again, GCSCORED is a global organization. And so we were going to take it around the globe to countries, developing countries, where we found strong interest in our agenda. And so we are reconsidering going to Ghana in 2017, and we would like to fine-tune our conference in the Caribbean. So we're basically going to cut our teeth in the Caribbean. And so we want to make sure that when we move it outside of this region, it is a product that all of us are proud of. And so we haven't decided where it's going to be yet, but we know it's going to be in 2017, and depending on the survey responses and other factors, we will let you know where that's going to be, the location. Secondly, GCSCORED Caribbean, GCSCORED is going to also, we have a newsletter that comes out monthly. And so I'm hoping that many of you, all of you, have given us your email addresses so that you can be a subscriber to the GC Scored Chronicle. It's called the GC Scored Chronicle. We are looking for writers, we're looking for authors, we're looking for individuals, practitioners, researchers, educators to submit articles and information, research that you've done, experiences that you've had that you would like to share with the GC Scored community across the globe. If you're interested in doing that, please talk with either myself or any of the GC Scored board members. In addition to that, you can also put it on the back of your evaluation. So in that case, we don't want your name. So I don't know how we will find out. What would we do in that situation? Because I want the surveys to be anonymous, but I also want to get information on who would be interested. So just talk to me, or Tanisha Lewis. So those are the two things. Those are ways that you can support this movement and this initiative by participating in the GC Scored, being an author or a writer for the GC Scored Chronicle, and also completing all the surveys that we've asked you to complete. Also, sharing this information on your Facebook pages or any other social media, making sure you take your program guide, program booklet to your supervisors and sharing with them the kinds of information you gathered throughout these last 3 days. And I think those are the main things that I want to share with you. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you. You have been awesome, and we have worked hard and tirelessly to make sure that you get culturally relevant, practical information that you can translate or generalize to your work setting when you leave this place. And I hope that those two goals have been accomplished. And we look forward to continued collaborations. Or in addition, there's one more thing. In addition to the conference coming in 2017, there's work to be done between now and then. So if you have, whatever organization you're working with, we want you to go back, talk with the decision makers, the policy makers, let them know that GC Scored is available to do program evaluations, professional development, professional training, any of those types of activities in an effort to continue this GC Scored initiative, so that you are not just waiting for a conference. There's work to be done in the process in the meantime. So keep that in mind. We are available for evaluations, program development, and professional development training. I thank you, and God bless you. I hope to get to speak to everybody here before this day is done. Take care. God bless.
Good morning, everyone. How are you feeling today? Well, I am feeling good. You know, for the last 2 days, I was somewhat constrained in my movement, but I feel energetic today. So I hope that you are feeling the same, because we're into the end. You know, it's very interesting that when you start a race, you have so much energy for the first day, and as you come to the winning pole, you kind of dissipate. You want to, stop. So I just want to energize you for this last day, because this is really the best. As the biblical statement is, we serve the best wine last. Okay, isn't that right? Yes, yes. Good, absolutely. So this morning we're going to start. I've just managed to get back 15 minutes from our organizer, so I appreciate that very much. Being a moderator is always very difficult, because I know I have been a speaker, and when I get cut short, I get really upset. So I am just giving everyone 15 minutes, and I'm going to be as loving and as kind as I can with that. So our first speaker or presenter today is Mrs. Margaret Sampson Brown. And here it says she is a retired. I would prefer to put responsible. So she's a responsible assistant commissioner. You know, I got to realize this when I was going to TARP. And it says TARP stands for Trinidad and Tobago Responsible, not retired. So I'm going to use that word, police. She has served in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service for 41 years. Currently, she holds the portfolio of manager of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Victim and Witness Support Unit. She sits on numerous committees which seek to advocate for change. Most noteworthy are the Child Protection Task Force Committee, Strengthening State Accountability to End Gender-Based Violence Committee, Parole Implementation Committee to introduce and implement a parole system for the prison service, and lastly, the Domestic Violence Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, our first presenter today is Mrs. Margaret Sampson Brown. I welcome you to the podium.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually nursing a cold here, but it's okay. Gona. Morning, y'all. How are you this morning? Well, I have a short time, so I'm just going to go straight into it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Victim and Witness Support Unit, which I have the privilege to manage with 14 professional officers. So, next. Okay. We're going to talk about the purpose of the unit, and that's our principal aim, and secondly, to develop and implement policies, programs, and initiatives. Purpose between the police service and the Victim and Witness Support Unit. How do the officers and they work in the unit? We've seen there, well, let me just go back a little bit. These are the officers attached. Some of the officers to the extreme left are not here with us anymore, but we have added additional officers. But how do we work? Operations of the unit. Provide support, provide information, accompany victims and witnesses to court, provide early assistance to prevent victim and witness, to prevent repeat victimization. In 2008, the Victim and Witness Support Unit came into existence. Around that time, they were transforming the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and at that time, they felt that a unit in which professional officers would be there to assist the victims and witnesses of crime. At that time, in 2008, we had just 6 officers, and we actually dealt with only reports of domestic violence and sexual abuse. From 2000, when I left the police service in 2011, and I began managing the unit, we increased that portfolio. So these are some of the operations of the police service. In fact, in 2008, where we are in 2015, we still have 2 of the officers who came in 2008, we're still with us, Mrs. Deborah Lee Rivera and Mrs. Aisha Price Corby. They're both here. Could you please stand? Ms. Rivera and Aisha Price Corby, 2000, they are the pioneers of the Victim and Witness Support Unit. Please give them a round of applause. Continuing with the operations of the VWSU, we're liaising with support agencies, engaging in educational drives, and performing other duties as requested by the Commissioner of Police. We are actually in police stations. We are not external to the police. We are operating out of police stations. And once a report is made, whether the report comes through the traditional form where persons go to the charge room, or you call someone, or you drop an anonymous note, however the information gets to the police or to us, the Victim and Witness Support Unit officers are duty-bound to respond. We operate, in addition to we operate out of police stations, we operate on a 24-hour basis. So notwithstanding we may be physically in a police station during the day or late in the night, but anytime 2 a.m., 3 a.m., because a crisis and a trauma has no time. So we will operate with them. Who do we serve? All these persons, victims of homicide, victims of kidnapping, victims of sexual offense, all these persons, all victims and witnesses of crime, the victim and witness support officers. We also have our special need persons. Quite recently we found that we were getting an increase in persons, in victims, because they are silent populations. Silent, they epitomizes the silence of the youth, the hearing impaired, the deaf. In fact, they prefer to be called deaf. Mentally challenged, physically challenged. And we had to, quite recently, we had to contact and liaise with the School for the Deaf in Cascade and have a training program. So my officers actually did a conversational training program so that we could have a conversation with the deaf. And we also have a manual, because we have found persons coming to the police station to make report, and people still feel the need to talk, it hit you and all them kind of sign. Deaf people hate that. They are people too. Deaf people are people too. Mentally challenged people. Recently we had to deal with a victim mentally challenged, and we really had some challenges with that. We also had the non-English speaking non-English speaking, when we had the human trafficking individuals. In fact, we have a silent population of not only youth but adults, where persons come here and have extended their stay without legal permission from the authorities, and they are living in squalor, in domestic violence situations, in sexual abuse situations, and they are scared to come and make the report, because the perpetrator is saying to them, if you go, I'm going to report you, and you will be deported, and the children will remain here with me. We'll talk about a case about that. In the progress of the Victim and Witness Support Unit, number of clients, when we started in 2008, it was just under 208 persons. And you saw the increase straight up 2014. We have seen for the year 2015, we have already seen 2,000 victims of crime. And we could add that because of the interactions that the Victim and Witness Support Unit has been doing, working with the schools, working with organizations, going out there, working with our youth population so that we can empower them, so that they have the strength to talk about the abuses occurring in their homes and other places. This is a report of sexual offenses with victims under 18, our youth population, from 2009 to 2013. And this source came from our Crime and Problem Analysis Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Now you will see on the top column, this is our divisions, where the police service is divided into 9 divisions: Southern, Central, Western, more the cardinal points. And during the year, all these data was collected from the police stations in the various divisions. And you would see here, right here where we're seeing, this is the year. And this is Eastern Division, is a division, Sangre Grande, east of here, Sangre Grande, Toko, Matlot, those Eastern Divisions. And in one of the slides I will add to that why we had to target Eastern Division, because Eastern Division, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do here? Okay. Press it again? All right, thank you. Yeah, this division here, Eastern Division, you would see there has been a division where we have the highest number of sexual abuse happening in that division. It's one of the biggest divisions in Trinidad and Tobago. The geography is very wide. It's a rural district. Poverty is one of the situations that is very critical occurring there. There's a place in Eastern Division, Matlot, which you have to take almost 2 hours to get from Matlot to Sangre Grande. 2 hours. The cost of getting from Matlot to Sangre Grande is $25. It's a one-way. And in that community is more agriculture and stuff, so we'll see that coming up here. What we have done so far, the VSU, Program and Initiative, we have done empowering our youth through self-awareness, strategies, educating, sensitizing, implementing programs, and we see it in the other slide what the victim and witness have done. What we have done over the period is that we have designed support groups, and this support group was not any other support groups. The support group entails the offenses coming to us. Take, for instance, in Shogunas. We found in Shogunas, we had a lot of reports of our youths beyond the control of the parents. We have gang violence in the schools, we have fighting, we have sexual abuse and whatever, but beyond control cases was very high in Central Division. So what we did is that we formed a support group. The name of the group was Reclaiming Your Path to Purpose, and the age group was just 13 to 16. So we got those groups together, and it was not a long drawn out, it was just about 3 or 4 months where we got those children who were victims, who were perpetrators, and we were able, through our policies and programs, supporting, empowering, strengthening. We took them to other groups so that they could have a sense of purpose, reclaiming your path to purpose. They came up with their own name so that they could have a sense of being part of the group. We just didn't bring them in the police station and say, listen, I want to form a group. But we actually had them formed their own, they named their group and so on. So they felt a sense of purpose, reclaiming their purpose. In Aruka police station, we saw an increase of sexual behavior. Almost on a daily basis, we would get about 5 reports of children engaging in sexual promiscuity from the school. We had the porn from the school. We had a couple of one of the school school girl committed suicide, and all of that. So we formed this. We had this sexuality workshop, unlocking the power within, because we know that our youth, more so our girls, had that power within. And the group was 14 to 19, and we had this seminar where we can address some of these sexual abuse victims. One of the victims in that group, she was just 12 years old and 14 years old, and she said, Miss, I had a hysterectomy, you know. And I said, okay, let's talk about it. Well, she didn't name the perpetrator, but the perpetrator was her father. She became pregnant by the sexual abuse. The baby remained in her and it died in her. And by the time the mother took her to the Mount Hope Hospital, they had to do a hysterectomy. So you could imagine a 14-year-old girl who she wasn't even to spell hysterectomy. She wasn't even a child, but she was a mother. We're continuing with this from the Anti-Kidnapping and Homicide Bureau, where we have children, youths, who witness their parents being murdered, who live in areas where violence is a norm, and we form the group Raising and Empowering Adolescent Lives, so that we could prepare our children, remove them. One of the key point in this group was one of the girls. She was just about 12 years old, and she witnessed her grandfather. He went to the shop and they just shot him and killed him, and she was present, and she was a member of this group. In fact, she led this group. She was the one who actually spoke about her pain, spoke about her anger, and we had to deal with it with the other members of the group so that we could raise and empower the lives of our victims. Also in Western Division, we had the gang violence coming out in school. So we had the group, we formed the children support group to provide therapeutic intervention for children between the ages of 11 and 13. And if you look all through the presentation, you would see that we actually had the ages between 12 and 19. That was the core age in which we had a lot of our challenges. Teen support group, Northern Division, again, we had those domestic violence victims, because we understand sometimes we as parents, we are saying, okay, we don't quarrel in front of our children, but children read more nonverbals than you do. So you may quarrel in the bedroom, by the time you come out outside, the children know what's happening. When you sit in the car and you drive to Port of Spain and you don't say nothing to each other, and your husband grunt, go on, yeah. What do you think the child says? What do you think the child absorbs? What energy are you sending that child to school? When you drop that child off to school, what happens? This was an initiative done in the Matlock community in 2011. What was key about this is that we looked at the stats. The crime and problem analysis is a unit in the police service which collates and collects all our stats from all reports. Once a report is made, the stat is collected and so on. So we were able, through this stats at our crime and problem analysis unit, to identify that in Matlock, which is a community at that time in 2011, had only 563 persons, but they had the highest report of incest. That's the same community that would cost $25 to come from Matlock to Toko one way, and halfway in Matlock somebody thieved the asphalt off the road. So you're driving on a smooth road halfway, and then the next side of the road you're going, so no cars ain't going up in Matlock because somebody thieved the asphalt. And the whole infrastructure, transport, whatever was far reaching for Matlock. Nobody hardly go to Matlock. So the persons themselves there, those are the ones who, the young ones became old and the old ones became older. And we looked at it and we realized the highest report, but then the highest report could be 6 persons. But then how do we get into Matlock to encourage person to let them know that incest is not a norm, it's not a way of life? So we decided as the victim and witness support officers to go into Matlock. So we spent a weekend in Matlock. We got a hotel and all 14 of us went into Matlock and we slept. Some of us slept on the floor, the couch, whatever. And during the day we walked in the community of Matlock because we felt that we wanted to, remember the first aim and objective of the unit was to bridge that gap between the police. We wanted the police and the community to trust us so that they can share information with us because we know it was happening. We walked through and we spoke with them. We're not going to go out, point to them and say, listen, you look like you're going incest, You look like you having sex with your father, You look... No, we just had that conversation with them to develop the trust. We spent a whole weekend, and during that time we also did an evaluation of, I'm saying I'm going to get a sign here now. So what we did is that after the evaluation we were able to go back in our units and come up with a program. So we went back there. We had a children's treat for our children, and we had a clothes giveaway for our children. We'll get the rest in the other thing. Coming out of that too, we had our regional conference, and every program that was instituted by the unit was informed by a practice and an information. We just don't come up and say, okay, I think we'll have a conference today. It was informed by an intervention. We felt, I have 5 minutes, we felt at that time that a conference, because we would have garnered sufficient information, so we had the conference right here where we brought stakeholders, caregivers, service providers, victims, perpetrators. They all came here, and for 3 days we pounded at each other to come up with a solution so that we could be able to have our victims move from being a victim to a victim. That's our conference there. And these are while we were having the adult conference here, we had a children's conference there. To the bottom right, you will see some of our hearing impaired and other specially challenged children. And we did it through art and drama and painting, because that's where our youth exude their pain and their anger through art. And we did that in our conference. We also had a men's conference coming out of the whole issue, because when we did evaluation in 2012, we said, okay, let's have a conference for women, but the conference was for both men and women. But we decided to have a conference for male only on the theme, wisdom, peace, and patience. 276 males came to the Shagaramas Convention Center and spent the day with us. And we had all those different topics. Well, we had a whole lot more, but it didn't fit on the slide. And that's our conference there. One of the key thing of the conference in the package was a white T-shirt. And we gave every one of the gentlemen who registered a white T-shirt. And anytime during the conference, if they felt that they needed to say something or they felt any anger, they were required to write it on their T-shirt. Any positive thing, negative, write it on the T-shirt and hang it in their wardrobe. I hope it's still hanging there so that they would be able to have, to remind themselves of the commitment they made to the conference and to each other so that we could make Trinidad and Tobago a better place and our youth would be able to exist. All those are giveaway and so on. We also had a Project Romeo, a Master Barber program for our youth. And these youth are youth of victims of some domestic violence. And we felt that it was needed sustainable skills for our children. And we had that program. And these are the graduates of the program here. All these youths here, they graduated, their master barbers. We got 2 master barbers, and they were able to train and develop our youths there in the back there. Project Ava is another project we felt that we had to go out there in the community, but not very many persons come. If you are in pain in Matlat or if you are in pain in a rural community, would you come? You can't come, you're scared to come, you're petrified to come. And the children, can a 5-year-old come to a police station and make a report? No, they can't. So we felt that we need to go where the clients are at. And we went out in the streets and walked the streets and tell people not, I want you to come and make a report that you were raped, but to give them the information so that they would be able. We saturated the public space with our presence, and this is where we will in some of the communities meeting and chatting with our communities. We work alongside with the police officers, notwithstanding that the victim and witness support officers are not police, but we have to work with our police officer. This is a video. I just want to tell you about it. This is a video, it's graphic. It's just 4 seconds, and we're going to show this video. It's really the silence of the youth. Yes, I have my time. I'm out of time. Could we just show this video? Go ahead. It's actually a video that was, what's this here now? That was taped, that's her father. That abuse has been going on for almost 3 years. And that was taped by her father. We will show the other aspects in our workshop. We'll continue our program in our workshop, and we also have a victim of abuse, sexual abuse, who's going to come and speak about her story in our workshop. I thank you. I'm unable to show the rest of the video, but we fix it up in the workshop. Thank you so much.
I'm sure that that you were totally enthralled by that presentation. It's unfortunate that we can see or hear the rest of it. But you will have total exposure to it during the workshop period. Our next presenter is Dr. Joseph. And Dr. Joseph started her academic career at the University of the West Indies, where she did an undergraduate degree in agriculture and then a master's degree in plant science. And then from there, she went off to the States, and she has more than 27 years experience in higher education. Currently, Dr. Joseph is the Executive Vice Chancellor, at the Indiana University South Bend since 2014, and she has been very active in ensuring that that university develop. And if you saw her during the first day of our presentation, and you got a sense that there's a lot of energy there. And I'm sure that she brings that same energy and passion to her work. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning we have the honor of welcoming Dr. Joseph to the podium to present.
Good morning. I am very, very grateful to have an opportunity to share a little bit of my story with you. But primarily, my goal here is to empower you, to ask you to pick up the flag, so to speak, and lead. We have been meeting for the last couple of days around the issue of youth and the welfare of our young people, not just in Trinidad, but globally. And as a mother of 3 sons, and I'm happy to say they're all grown, and now I have my grandchildren to put my energy into, a pleasurable thing, I'll tell you. I get up every day and I think of how can I do better? How can I use my talents, my skills, and all my blessings to make the world a better place and to impact positively everybody that I meet every day. So my job here this morning in the next 15 minutes is just to give you a little taste of what you can do to become a leader and to become an influencer. We tend to believe that this is happenstance, and for some people it is, but leadership is purposeful. Making change requires hard work, dedication, and a goal. And I just want to give you a little idea of my journey with some examples from the literature on how people are influenced. So I have been introduced a few times, and my name is Jan Joseph, and of course that JANN has been a little bit of a challenge for me. Over the years, people never quite understood why the 2 N's. My mother was just this really creative, reading type of person who thought things would be fun when she did them differently. I inherited that. But I want to just walk you through a little bit of my path for leadership, because I have come to a place of understanding around collaborative leadership, and we have been talking about that. And that is the really bedrock of a successful administration and being able to impact positive change. We cannot change, we cannot help others to change until we first understand what we need to do. And the challenge before us in this conference and beyond is a very difficult one. So what are the steps along the way? What are the paths that we must, as managers and administrators, what must we take? What must we do so we could influence others and make a difference? Influencing other people is not a negative thing. If you choose to influence others to make poor decisions, you're going to have to pay a price for that in this life or beyond, wherever you believe. But if you choose to use your power to influence others for positive change, there are lots of rewards that come for that. So in the next few minutes, I just want to share a little bit about my experience some more, make some connections to the literature and the best practices on leadership, and have us talk a little bit, as we will in the workshop coming up, on how we can become lifelong learners, people who are going to impact change in our world. So the question I have always, is leadership the same everywhere? Is it a yes answer or is it a no answer? What do you all think? Is leadership the same in every environment? How many people say yes, it's the same? Leadership, leading people, it's the same no matter where you go. All the people say yes. Okay, all the people who say leadership is different wherever you go. Show of hands, some hands. Okay, all the people who have no opinion. Okay, all the people who are not listening or simply dead. Now, as a teacher, I would always do an exercise like this, and I would always remind people, because this is an example of leadership. Right here, we just did it. I ask you to make a decision. Do you say yes? Do you say no? Or do you disagree? So here are the 3 choices I gave you. 1, you agree. 2, you disagree. And 1, you have no opinion, you're not sure. And there were many of you who didn't respond to any of those. So if you didn't agree, you didn't disagree, you had no opinion, you must be dead. So get up, engage, do something. Because that's what leaders do, because each of us can lead from where we're planted. You remember the old saying, bear fruit where you're planted? So let's do this again. How many people believe that leadership is the same everywhere? Yes. How many people say that leadership is different? Depends on where you're going. And how many people really not sure, they have no opinion? Okay, all right, so most people disagree that leadership. But you see the difference now. You had to think about it, you had to engage, and you had to act. And that's where you start making a difference. That's where you start making a difference. So if you come to the conference and you hear all these wonderful ideas, and they don't change you, they don't create an opinion in you, they don't create passion in you, you wasted 3 days. You ate some good food, you hung out in a pretty hotel, but that's not why you're here. You're here so that you could learn, that you could grow, and you could go back out in the world and impact change in a positive way. And to do that, you have to start with yourself. And most of us are in the public sector. And the public sector is different from the private sector. In the private sector, they say, do this, you do it. You go out and you make 100 widgets in an hour, we sell it for 50 cents per widget, we make this profit. But in the public sector where we serve, and it's service, I remind you, it's service. In the public sector where we serve, leadership is a little bit tricky. You just don't go and say, do this, do that. Make this, X amount. We have to change people's minds and hearts to follow us. Because when people come to work with us, when they come to serve with us, we're looking at these very heart-wrenching videos. We're hearing of these stories for the last few days. We have seen the down, dirty, and the ugly of our humanity. Because the ugliest part of our humanity is where we negatively impact our children. So this is not a time to not be committed. This is not a time for a half-baked approach to it. You're not sure if you have an opinion, or maybe you have an opinion. Yes, and I could be tough. My children say, yeah, Mom, you could be tough. But I do the tough love. This is a time to get up and fight and to lead people in a direction that would make a difference for our children. So how do you do that? In this type of environment, and I could talk at some length if I had time about the different types of leadership and different groups, but there are market-driven ones, and of course advocacy and hierarchical organizations, like in the police service they have hierarchy and people say. But in our type of environments, they tend to want something that what the literature describes as a clan leadership. We work as groups, we work as family. We have gathered here, we have prayed, we have danced, we have sung, we have laughed together. That's family. And families function differently. So again, I'm just touching briefly on some of these things, but I want you to know that this whole process of being an administrator and a leader is a very purposeful process. What we find is that we end up in environments, which started off with me, is that as a good teacher, I became a good department head or department chair. As a good department chair, I became a good associate dean. And then I realized I was so out of my league. I had no idea what I was doing. And that's when I was fortunate to get really good support, really good mentorship. And I'm going to talk about those a little bit today, now and then again in the workshop. But you get good support, you get good mentorship, and you get good preparation. Because leadership is not something you just do well because you went through the ranks. To be really able to influence others, it requires a little bit of study, a little bit of preparation for leadership. And I'll share some of that with you as well. So as you try to understand who you are, you would find, and I put some references there, there are lots of different instruments that help you understand your characteristics, your personalities, and the type of different groups that you could work with to influence them. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of who I am, because as I did these types of preparation, I found out these things about myself. These are some words that describe me. And they do very extensive tests to determine these things, and they're all been normalized with thousands of people, hundreds of thousands in some cases around the globe. So they're very accurate. And I am by nature and some nurture a person who enjoys learning. I love to make a list and see it through. Therefore, I am an achiever. I have something they call command, which I found out was only 5% of the people have. And I said, how did I get that? And they said, well, it's genetic. So I'm like, whatever. But it's really the ability to work with others and to do this, to have this type of conversation. And you could nurture it, and some of it comes naturally as well. Communication. Leaders, you have to know when to be shy and know when to speak up. And not because, if you look on the right side, I'm an extrovert, not because extroverts are able to talk freely means that we are going to be better speakers. Lots of introverts are very good speakers, and we could talk about how you develop those skills as well. I like data. I like to see things through sensing. I like to think things through. I like to have logical things come to me. And over on the judging side, I am not judgmental. Judging means I love to see things in some specific order, make sense of it, solve a problem, and then go back and make a decision. And of course, as an activator, I'm one of those people, if you ask me to do something, I'm going to follow through. Like Yvonne talked, she said, here's what I need. I said, sure, we can make it happen. And then I went and said, okay, how do I make it happen? I figured out we find the money. So those are the type of skills that describe me. When you find out about yourself, you would realize that you have a whole set of different skills. It doesn't matter. Each of us have different strengths. The key to it is how to use those strengths to bring people together under something that's described as collaborative leadership, which sometimes you discover your style as you're in the middle of it, as I did. So basically, what I'm asking you to do is think about what you're doing in this exercise today, and think about why you're here, and who are the people that you're trying to influence, and how do you bring them together to solve a problem. And this directly comes from the literature on what is collaborative leadership, and I give you the website link here so you could look at it yourself. But the idea behind it is, who are we and why are we doing this? What's the context for this work? What brings us together? Is it our shared vision for young people? But what are the things that we share here? What are our values? And how are they aligned? You need to understand that. How do we trust others? Is there a place that we could trust others and develop the relationship so that we could pursue that shared purpose? And as we have power and influence, how do we share it? How do we use our power and influence with humility? It's not my title or my job. You know, one of my deans was here and he was saying to somebody, well, oh yeah, she's my dean and I'm Yvonne's dean. And I was like, no, I'm nobody's boss. We work together. And he's like, no, you run the whole campus. And I said, no, that's not the point. It's not how many people report to people. My husband laughs at me. He says, oh, you have people who have people, you have people to do that for you. And that is true. I do have a lot of people who have people. But that's not the point of my life, and that's not the purpose. The purpose here is for me to use whatever quote-unquote power that has been given to me so freely, those blessings that have come my way, to influence others, to make a difference. So I'm asking all of us to find that place where we have that power and give it freely. Sometimes we're so busy trying to hold our information because we say knowledge is power. And we feel that by having that knowledge, it empowers us, that people need us. But this is like the 10 talents. We have prayed a lot here. We have connected. This is like the 10 talents. You could take that gift and you could put it under your mattress. Or you could invest it and see it come back to you tenfold. And I have discovered in my life journey as a professional that applying those principles that I learned and those values that I learned as a child, as a young adult, by giving freely to others, it actually multiplies back more to me. So the more generous I have been in sharing the things I have gotten, sharing my quote-unquote power, knowledge and skills, I have been given more and more responsibilities, more and more power and influence. So it's the thing that's when you divide it, it truly multiplies. So please, be generous with your information. Share the knowledge that you have. Don't try to trade it for something. trade it for money. Money will come. Money will always come. If you give of yourself and you try to make a positive difference, people will be happy to pay you even more to give more of yourself. So don't be worried about that. So think about how you get professional development for yourself, because you can't give what you don't have. And then after that, think about how you pass that to others. I have had scores of people, it seems like, who have helped me throughout. I have had older people, younger people who have been mentors to me. And as I got the quote-unquote power and influence, I have tried to use that to give that back to others. I have shared that, and I'm always wondering, did I do enough? Did I do enough? Every morning you ask yourself, can I do more? Can I give more? Because unless you're willing to ask those tough questions of yourself, that self-reflection and continuous improvement, you would become stagnant. Never feel that you are doing good and you have arrived. If you're not moving forward, you're actually going backward. Because as you are standing still, others are passing you. So the equivalent of that is going backward. So keep moving forward and keep growing and learning. Because as we try to influence others, we must set our goals, we must know what we want, and we want to focus on some really small behaviors at a time that we could change. So in the workshop, I would get into some more details on some of these things, because you're trying to pull together what we are going to describe as those 6 sources of influence. And I connected these a lot to various projects that I worked on. So in the workshop, we could talk some more about some of my cases that we have done. Talking about personal motivation. Why are you here? Personal ability. We'll talk again about this. Social motivation. And I'll be able to give some examples of some specific things that I did, that I have them up here. And then we'll talk too more about, if you wish, in the workshop, social ability. How do we mentor others? Structural motivation. And this was a really fun one, the 5th one, structural motivation. It's a very strong motivation. And what I have found, when I could fight to increase people's salaries, when I could fight to provide professional development, it's amazing the difference it makes. And I know people, we don't want to make everything about money, as I said, but you could use your money for good. Because an example of the power and influence of the money that I had to share, not personal money, but university resources that I have to make the judgment on. One of the judgments I had to make was to use resources and time, because I am not on vacation, even though I live here. I'm just here for 3 days. It's pure business, and I have to just get on a plane tomorrow and get back to work. But I could use those resources to come here, to engage in this conference, to speak to you, to share, and to support my dean, who was here earlier, and my faculty member, around something that I value, around something that I feel is a good thing to do to give back to the world, starting with the country of my birth. I could choose to use that resource, as I have done with Yvonne, to say, we would put X amount to co-sponsor this conference. That's a choice you make, and that's structural motivation. So by doing that, I have empowered my dean, I have empowered Yvonne, well, I call her Yvonne, Dr. Lera, in a way that she can go on and even multiply it further. And that's what I'm asking you to think about. And of course, we could talk about structural ability and stuff later on. But I really wanted to use this time just to give you a little hint of how we can, in the social structure, change, in the social environment, change the world. And, and I have some stuff I want to share with you here, because I just want to finish up by saying that sometimes as leaders, we try, when we go into a new role, or we think of a new thing we want to do, we try to change the organization. But what I'm asking you to do is start thinking about, how do you challenge and change yourself? We should focus on ourselves, because we need to revisit at each point before we try to make a difference. What are our values? What motivates us? What is your integrity, my integrity? How do I learn and how do I understand the culture of this new organization, this new thing I'm trying to change? Because at the core of our leadership, the core of our ability to lead and influence others is to build trust. And you build trust by getting to know people and understanding who they are. And the next thing I want to remind us, and I remind myself, is to hold us accountable, to hold myself and for you to hold yourself accountable. Because you cannot hold others accountable unless you're willing to hold yourself accountable for all these things that we have discussed and these actions that we've been seeing occurring against our youth. And sometimes we speak about trickling down power. But I would say to this, don't focus on trickling down power. Instead, try to think about your integrity and your accountability and try to make that the bedrock of your leadership. So that's what's trickling down in your organization. Not your power to tell 2 people, to tell 3 people, to tell 4 people to do what you want, 5 strings down, the higher you go, but really to set the example for each of those people so that the organization itself becomes a place where people are accountable to themselves and to others. Because at the end of the day, as leaders, all of us in this room are leaders in our own right. We must make decisions. And as we make the decisions, they must be genuine and there must be a combination of our intuition. We must trust ourselves and there must be a trust for others and they must be based on our understanding of the facts and our analysis of the facts within us that we know. But our decisions must always be consistent. And they must be driven by the mission of the organization or the group or the things that we want to change. And only then can we expect to have long-lasting and positive change that impacts our culture. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to share with you. I look forward to sharing some more of the things that have come to me so freely. That as any of you who are interested in leadership roles, please come. We could talk about how we could support professional development and how we could talk about your growth and development. Again, thank you for your attention.
Our next presenter is Dr. Susan Wilfred. I will put Smith because it's not here, but I will. White, sorry. But it's not here, so that's why I missed it. So Dr. Wilfred White, thank you very much for that additional point. She's a medical director of the C.S. Mott Children's Hospital, Pediatric Comprehensive Weight Management Center, and the co-director of the Child Health Evaluation and Research. It's abbreviated CHEAR, chair. Her research has been funded by the National Institute of Health, and it focuses on interventions in the clinical setting for the treatment of childhood obesity and the use of communication technology to aid physician-patient communication and enhance patient adherence to treatment recommendations. Dr. Wilfred White is the founding chair of the eHealth and mHealth, and she'll explain that to us, what it means, section of the Obesity Society, and serves on the advisory board of the American Academy of Pediatrics Institute for Healthy Childhood Weight. In recognition of her innovative work in the area of childhood obesity, Dr. Wilfred White has received awards from the Academic Pediatric Association, and from the Society for Adolescent Medicine. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dr. Wilfred White.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. It is an absolute joy to be here this morning. And I know we're short on time, so I won't spend a lot of time telling you any more about myself because you've heard from Dr. Clark, and my sister so eloquently yesterday described our background. So you know about our birth in England and our Trini parts and all that we know from that stance. But I do want to take a few moments as they bring up my slides just to say a couple of words about Dr. Laria. She looks surprised. In the over a quarter of a century, I hate to say it, that we have known each other, we have gone through so much, and one of the things that we often joke about is her passion and commitment. When she embraces a project, she just becomes consumed by it. And I knew when she told me a few years ago that she was going to do this, that she was going to throw herself into it, and it would happen. But who could have imagined this? God has really worked through her, and I am so moved to be here today. And the thing about Dr. Laria is not only is she committed to causes, but to people. And if she is committed to you and to your success, she will work night and day to make that happen. So, as you might find out, you may want to stick pretty close to her. And as a beneficiary of her commitment, because in anything I've done in life, she has been there for, as I say, for the last quarter of a century, just as a supporter and an encourager, and I think that she's a hero, and that has led me to the topic that I would like to speak about today, about superheroes. So, if you can turn up the volume there for me. While they turn up the volume there for me, we'll wait for them for a second to get all that going. The one thing I wanted to, let's see, do I need to push it to make it go, or will you? And Yvonne, I know it's very uncomfortable to hear people talk about you endlessly, but I would have swum the ocean to be here. Okay, so we're going to talk about superheroes today, and hopefully we are all connected. Are we ready to go? Okay, here we go. So I would like you all to turn to your neighbors at this point. This is the interactive point, and say, I am a superhero. All right, very good. Now, some of you look like you're convinced by that, but some of you are not too sure. But hopefully by the end of the presentation today, I will have convinced you that you really are indeed superheroes to the children in your lives. And maybe to get us there, if we think about what the definition of a superhero is, someone who's a protector or a defender. Someone who in the face of adversity or from a position of weakness displays courage for a greater good for humanity. So, what is the thing that we need to protect humanity from? What is this great adversity that we face? Well, I would suggest that it's childhood obesity. Now, many will say others, but I hope I'm going to prove to you today that it's certainly a major threat, and we need superheroes like you to help us address it. Now, I know it's a little bit bold for somebody who is based in America, where we have such significant problems with obesity, to come here and talk about what one should do in this arena. And I know that in America, we like to think that we're the biggest and the best with everything, right? But, and forgive me, I hope I'm using this phrase correctly, but we certainly have to boil down like Bargy when it comes to healthcare and things like obesity, because we certainly don't have it solved. But hopefully, from the experience we've had with such an epidemic, you can learn a little bit from our failures. So one of the things that we failed with is recognizing this early enough. over the past 3 decades, there's been this increase, but it took a while for people to come to realize that it was a problem. But we have, over the last maybe 10 years or so, come to a better understanding of it as a problem. And many people have started speaking out about it, and very prominent people indeed. So here are some.
In trying to tackle one of the urgent health issues that we face in this country, and that is the increase in childhood
How nearly
obesity.
1 in 3 of our children in this country is now overweight or obese. Like how 1 in 3 kids today will eventually develop diabetes. And in the African American and Hispanic communities, the number is nearly half.
We are raising a generation of youngsters who are overweight, obese, and can be saddled with more disease than we could ever imagine.
You know, if we don't change the obesity trend we have right now in America, by the time the next generation takes the mantle of responsibility, almost 90% of us will be overweight or obese.
And you know, once Dr. Oz says something, I don't know if you guys have him here, but in America, once he says something, it becomes a real problem. So it's certainly been recognized in the US, and here hasn't gone unnoticed. Your Minister of Health has made many comments about the importance of this as a public health priority, and in fact has noticed it as one of the things that threaten our children. And here in one of his promotional campaigns, it's not guns, it's Freddy French fries is a big killer. And indeed, this is true. It might seem like an overstatement, but it really is true. And when we think about why this is such a big deal, we look at how much it costs us globally to address obesity. So on this slide, at the bottom, we have trillions of dollars. Those are US dollars, so I guess you'll multiply by 6 here, or 6.7. And then we have all of the things that could be social burdens, or at least many of them. And so you see them increase going along the side there. Things like unsafe sex and pollution, illiteracy, all these sorts of things. And look at the cost of them. Obesity costs $2 trillion, US dollars, globally. Only third to smoking and armed violence, which is terrorism and war. So certainly it has a huge impact on us. And we all know that obesity has a lot of impact on things like heart disease, diabetes, strokes, cancers. I just wanted to bring one example, looking at hypertension. If we look at the risk of hypertension, that's relative risk at the bottom there, and then along the side, we have increasing BMI. And so we see the BMI categories coming up. So there's the healthy weight category, the overweight category, and the obese category. And then you'll see, if you look at the relative risk for hypertension, how it dramatically goes up as your BMI goes up. How many people in the room know their BMI? A few. How many in the room know their child's BMI? Important to know, because as in adults, that it has this effect on health. Similarly, with children, as their BMI percentile increases, they are also at risk for more diseases. So not only are all the things that you would commonly expect to hear that obesity affects, it also affects our chromosomes, if you would believe it. These are pictures of chromosomes. And at the bottom here are our telomeres. Now, when you leave this conference today, you will be able to say that at GCSCORED, you learned the key to longevity, the key to living a youthful life. And that key is those telomeres. Those protect your genetic material. And so long as they stay intact and nice and healthy, we think you stay pretty young. But as you age, the process of aging is as the chromosomes reproduce and multiply, do you see how the bottom part, the telomere, gets shorter and frayed? That process of telomeres getting shorter is associated with aging and with illness. Well, here's the interesting thing. The chromosomes, the telomeres of obese adults are shorter and more frayed than those of healthy weight adults. So they are suffering more illnesses, partly as a result of this. And that happens even if, as an adult, you then lose weight. I'm sorry for anybody who wants to go and lose weight now. You should. It will have other benefits, but from this standpoint, it has some long-lasting results. But the good news is that for children who are obese, we don't see a difference in those telomeres. So this highlights the need to do something about this problem while they're still young, not to wait till they've gotten older. But while they're young, while their telomeres may not have been impacted, they are certainly affected by many illnesses. As you see here, obesity affects almost every organ system, and including affecting their psychosocial health. And so we really want to do something about it. I think we can agree that it is in fact a threat. So we say it's an issue of dealing with adversity and from a position of weakness. Why do I say we're in a position of weakness? I hope many of you didn't wake up this morning feeling weak, and after this, hopefully we'll realize we're not completely weak, but there are a lot of forces against us. And so when we think about obesity, we think about it being calories in and calories out, but it's so much more than that. Are many of you familiar with this socio-ecological model of thinking about health? How many are? Oh, not many. So I'll just spend a second on it then. So when we think about the things that affect obesity, it is not just what you eat or how active you are. There's so many things that come into play in that. And we live in what we'd call an obesogenic environment. Everything is against us actually being a healthy weight. So if we look at all the different levels here, all of these things affect whether you develop obesity. So at the individual level, your genes obviously play a role, whether your parents gave you genes that are going to be thrifty and hold on to every pound that you eat. And your psyche, how you think about food, will play a role. And then interpersonally, whether your family is an active family, whether you were breast or bottle fed, all of those things play a role. Organizational, what happens in your environment at work or at school. And this is what we're going to talk a lot about in our workshop, how we can affect this at the organizational level and the societal level, how we can make an impact. And then at the community level, what kinds of things are in your communities? I don't know about here, but in many low-income counties and areas in the US, what are the things that you can find almost on every corner? Fast food restaurants, absolutely. You can't find a healthy store for love nor money, but you can find fast food restaurants. What's in your community and how safe it is will play a role as well. And then, at the societal level, the kinds of laws and policies that the government puts in place, and what the media tells us. And this societal level brings us also to consider societal norms, which are something I'd like us to think about. So, as you know, as I've mentioned, my work focuses around obesity, and my sister, as you heard yesterday, focuses a lot on diversity. And as my big sister, I look up to her for many things, and so I said to her, you know, Carol, we're having such a hard time addressing obesity. What kinds of things do you think we should look at? And amongst the many things, she had lots of ideas, many of them we're pursuing, but one of them was looking at ethnic identity and obesity. And so we did a study that we call the HERE study, looking at amongst African American adolescents, and actually we went to Barbados as well and did focus groups there with adolescent girls and asked them what were their preferences around hairstyles and looked at how this impacted their reports of their physical activity. So it was a mixed method study. We did the focus groups and then we had surveys. And one of the things that we found, we asked them, I don't know if you can see the letters on those pictures very well from the back of the room, but can you guess which hairstyle they liked the best? Just call it out, call it out. I think somebody said it. A, without a doubt, A was the most popular hairstyle, and BB here was pretty popular. Can you guess which was the least popular hairstyle? H, which is H. This one here? No, that one wasn't. S, which is S. No, close, very close. It was this one. Oh, was their least favorite hairstyle, which was really very interesting to us. Because if you know who these people are, they're siblings. And here, Solange has natural hair. Here, Beyonce has permed hair or other additions. And they certainly had a preference. No matter where we went, that was a preference we saw. And we also found that they knew that those styles that looked more like this made it harder for them to exercise. And we were able to show that those who had a higher ethnic identity rating on the ethnic identity scale were more likely to exercise, and those that scored lower on the ethnic identity scale were less likely to, or engaged in less exercise. So it's interesting, the social norms, the things that we're told are attractive and lovely and what we should aim for, seem to have an effect on our health. And we can change what that narrative is. It isn't inherently the case that this is beautiful and this isn't, or that isn't and this is. We decide those things. And if you don't believe that, I'll tell you a brief story. I haven't had a note sent to me yet, so I feel safe in saying that. Growing up in England, I have to say this very delicately, we were, Caucasians tend to have, if you think about your derriere, it's really quite flat. However, those of us with the African heritage may have more prominence in that region. We all grew up believing that that was a problem. We spent our lives with long cardigans covering up. We would tease friends, oh, you gave me a note. We would tease people about the fact that it was too prominent. So then I graduated from secondary school, took a plane to America, and found that people were celebrating derrieres. They were singing songs about your bottom. It was, I could tell there was no problem. What happened between one plane ride? It was a cultural norm that was different. We can change cultural norms, and we can do it in a way to help the health of our children. And we should really think about that. They need heroes that will do that for them. So let me move on. So all of those things play a role. And when we face all those adversities, what do? We have all these kids who have excess weight, and we have to try to treat it. At the University of Michigan, we have our weight management center that I mentioned, and we do a lot of different things. We have a multidisciplinary team that helps us treat this. This is our program, the Michigan Pediatric Outpatient Weight Evaluation and Reduction Program. We have a lot of different team members, and we treat kids for 6 months. We address all those topics that you see there. We're going to be flying through this now. And at the hospital, they come to see us. They get lots of testing of their metabolism, their body composition. They have exercise classes with us. We do nutrition interventions, we do liquid diets, we do grocery store tours and special events of that nature. We have a strong behavioral component to the whole program, which is really important to why we do the things we do or make the choices we make. And we've published on our results, which look very favorable. But not all kids do very well, and so in some cases, we have kids who go on to have bariatric surgery. Can you imagine having to do bariatric surgery on a 400, 500 pound child? And we have a lot of kids who are in that range. Unless you think that you in Trinidad are not affected by this, I will let you know that I think one of the youngest cases of bariatric surgery was performed in Trinidad on a child who I believe was 8 years old. So this is a significant problem, and we have to try to address it. But we are faced with some kryptonite. The kryptonite is poor adherence. How do we get people to adhere to things we want them to? Now, of course, the best thing we can do is if we could change their environment. Now, My kryptonite, I put up there, is roti. That is the Trini part of me. And I have to tell you, environment is an amazing thing. When I got on the plane to come to Trinidad on Sunday, I was looking forward to some roti, some bus-up shot, and some doubles. Now, 3 days later, not a piece has passed my lips. Do you know why? Because the Hyatt has to be on a health kick. They have given us lovely salads, they have given us beans, not a roti in sight. They shaped my environment so well, I'm going to go home 5 pounds less than when I came here. Now, that shaping of environment, you can do it for your children and you can do it for yourself. Even though I had the motivation to eat it, I didn't because it wasn't around. But if you can't shape environment in that way, maybe you can give cues to action. And so we often thought about how can we help kids when they're not with us, when they're tempted to have something else. How could they hear a voice telling them to have something healthy? And not any voice. How could they hear my voice telling them to have something healthy? And so we thought, let's reach out with some of the things that we know they use. We wanted to be able to communicate with them individually, not just a mass communication, but an individual type of intervention. And so we looked to using mobile technology, and we'll talk a lot more about this in our workshop. And so we know that those kids are using these telephones all of the time, and so even from birth it seems. And so we have developed text messaging interventions. We use Facebook, we use social media, all of these things to reach out to children. But we need help. Those things are not the best. We need people who touch the lives of children on a daily basis. And that is where I think you come in. Children in Trinidad, from our trend data, we can see this shows their physical activity. How many days they're getting how many are getting 5 to 7 days of physical activity? Very few. That's males and females. How many are getting 0 days of physical activity at school? Most of them are not getting physical activity in school. How many of them are engaged in sports most days? Not many. And how many are reporting sadness and suicidal ideation based on their weight status? We see that that is a concern here. So we need help. And we know that there are things being done. This is Ms. Lewis of your Ministry of Health and having a health camp here. But I met with her yesterday for several hours, and she talked about the fact that she needs help. More people on board making a difference. And so this is a paper that Dr. Larry and I published a few years ago about the role of school counselors. We know that school counselors have the opportunity, because of their contact with children, to really make a difference. And so we want to suggest, I'd like to suggest, that every piece matters. The educators, administrators, those in public safety, counseling, community, no matter what's your area, if you have contact with children, you can make a difference. And if you come to our workshop following this, we'll talk about how you can do that. So thank you so much. I hope you've decided that you indeed are superheroes.
Our next speaker, and I think we're doing really well for time. I'm very pleased with myself. Yeah. Good. Is Dr. Leon Wilson. He's currently the Provost and Vice President of Academics at the Alabama State University in Montgomery, and he's been in that portfolio since 2012. He serves as Dean at the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at the university before joining the administration at Alabama State University. Dr. Wilson was a professor and chair of the Department of Sociology at the East Carolina University. Previously, he served on the Sociology Department faculty at Wayne State University in Detroit for nearly 2 decades. He's a graduate of the University of the Southern Caribbean. On the island of Trinidad, he holds a master's degree in theology and counseling from Andrews University, Berrien Springs, Michigan, and another master's degree and PhD in sociology from the University of Michigan. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to the call to the stage podium Dr. Wilson.
Good morning. I witnessed firsthand yesterday the power of the moderator. And so I left yesterday afternoon, went home and trimmed my presentation, took out all of the PowerPoint stuff from there so that I can stay within the limit and not be escorted off the stage by my Bajan friends. Let me invite you to the workshop after, because all the stuff that I've taken out, I will discuss in that forum. I do work on risk factors, risk and protective factors among adolescents in the Caribbean, and have done some of the largest surveys on that topic and on the area of family in the region. Today I'll talk a little bit in this session about my passion, and that is my advocacy for data-driven intervention, prevention, and data-driven any and everything that has to do with planning programs and executing them. And so my remarks are going to be very, very general. And in the workshop, I will share with you a lot more data. And I'll share with you a major study that we did and give you an example of how we can use these data to develop models of intervention and counseling modalities. So I invite you to come, and we'll talk about that at that point. Let me begin by thanking the organizers of this opportune and rather relevant conference. Their foresights and decision to bring this conference within the context of the Caribbean is to be applauded. Secondly, I want to thank Dr. Laria for inviting me to present on this important topic. I met her for the first time just yesterday or 2 days ago. It's Wednesday already. But I've known her for a long time. I received a telephone call once, and we spoke, and from that point on, it was like I knew her forever. I knew her folks. And when I heard the powerful prayer of her dad, I remember that voice from when I attended school in this area many, many moons ago. Our interaction over the last few days reminds us that translation science is not exclusive to the STEM disciplines, but is applicable to the work we do as counselors, social scientists, lay people, everybody. We are aware that the most sophisticated scientific discovery, the most intricate medical finding, the most complex engineering feat would all amount to nothing but for the human science of communication and the concomitant sciences embedded in the domains of human interaction. Even more appropriately is the acute realization that the models of our various disciplines and the theories that inform them must not only be sensitive to the vagaries of the cultural environment, but also to the within cultural variations in the context in which they're executed. Thus, while we must not be guilty of importing foreign models without the necessary indigenous scrutiny for adaptability, we must not also be guilty of the monolithic fallacy associated with the Caribbean region. You know, the lumping all of us into one basket. The translation of social models of social intervention is not new to the Caribbean. If you're a reader of our history, one will remember, and yes, our history. I was born in Guyana, and I come to Trinidad much more often than my colleagues who are Trinidadians. I can bet that. Around 1944, 1945, Lady Huggins, the governor, thank you for the little serenading we probably needed at this time. Lady Huggins, the then governor in Jamaica, governor's wife in Jamaica, initiated a program to correct the so-called social, moral, and economic evils of promiscuity. You would remember that? The mass marriage movement, it was called. Of course, promiscuity was defined in that context and conceived without due consideration of the normative practices and the cultural mores of the Jamaican society. And thus, as earlier and more contemporary scholars all contend, that movement failed due to the mismatch of the Royal Commission's view on conjugality and the Jamaican understanding of such relationships. Such discordance can easily be perpetuated since our indigenous creations of social intervention are not plentiful. And sometimes, unfortunately, those of us with advanced training get our training in North America or England and adapt some of these models without due consideration of our own cultural context. The tracking of risk factors among adolescents is a staple in developed countries. A sampling of such studies would include the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, NHANES as we know it, the European School Survey Project on Alcohol and Other Drugs, and others. One characteristic of all of these studies is that they are longitudinal, which means that we can track information over time, use that information for intervention, and do our evaluation and continue a process that make innovation much more meaningful and data-driven. By contrast, studies in the Caribbean are episodic, and despite good intent, the data are not often optimally used for the basis of intervention and the development of counseling modalities. Despite the fact that the literature has continuously shown that given the dynamic nature of adolescent development, such research should always be done continuously if interventions will be credible. By way of illustration, the famous study called Monitoring the Future, now in its 40th years, is a classic example of how far-reaching such data collection initiatives could be, and I challenge us in the Caribbean, especially Caribbean governments, to be sensitive to the tremendous value of supporting longitudinal efforts, especially as it has to do with youth trends in the region. This study has been the source of over 500 professional articles, over 120 monographs, but most importantly, the study has led to 17 congressional hearings that have influenced policies on risk behavior in the United States. I am saying and being an advocate for us to do the same in this region so that we can have the data to support the efforts. We are far too poor a region to be investing in programs of any sort without the data to buttress their utility and to attest to their effectiveness. We are not completely void of data collections efforts, however. Data are routinely collected by several agencies on all sorts of issues in the Caribbean. However, the essential and most often type of data that we find prolific in our region are often aggregated, and as such are subjected, and here comes this paper, and are subjected to all the problems associated with trying to make inferences from aggregate data. I'm not against aggregation, but for the most part, agencies pit us against societies of the world, and there is never the corresponding emphasis on information that is most suitable for intervention, and that information is only collected when we are able to look at the critical contextual and personal variables that inform the trend that we see. And I'm going to skip on. I'm afraid of Bajan fellas. And he told me I have 5 minutes. My hope, and I skipped a lot, is that this conference will inspire a renewed culture and a greater commitment to studies that utilize the vast array of information that is available aggregately, but more than that, will encourage more individual and community-level studies in order to isolate those critical variables and factors that might explain the trends we see in aggregate data. I will, in the workshop, utilize one such study that is available and is not utilized effectively. The global school-based health surveys is a credible source of information on the status of risk factors of adolescents in the Caribbean and around the world. Grouped with the Americas, every Caribbean country is provided the option to participate with opportunities to add some uniqueness to the surveys once the core questions are satisfied. The major limitation of this effort, as I will describe later, is that most countries seemingly lack the resources to complete the cycle from data collection to a data report and utilizing the data for intervention purposes. In fact, of all the countries in the Americas, only Trinidad and Tobago has completed the cycle from data collection to a final report. Why should we care? And I will close with just some few comments that we will elaborate on. UNICEF report indicates the following. Children and adolescents are more the victims of armed violence than perpetrators. In some countries in the Caribbean and Latin America, up to 12% of the victims of homicides are under the age of 18, while the number of adolescents themselves responsible is about 1%. The Caribbean ranks first globally when it comes to murder rates, as was said yesterday, and claims the highest rates of homicides among young people aged 15 to 17. Boys are 6 times more likely to be victims than girls. In terms of abuse, adolescent boys are most at risk in home and school for beatings, while adolescent girls are more at risk for sexual harassment and abuse from adult men in the family, school, and workplace. Why do we care? Violence against girls is equally prevalent, but of another character. Girls are most subjected to violence at home and at school, where they're sexually abused. Every year, the cost of risky behavior goes up. In America alone, $294 billion on average are being spent in preventable care costs, extra law enforcement, auto crashes, crime, and lost productivity. Given all of these realities, I invite you to let us talk a little bit about risk factors and how they exist within the Caribbean, and discuss ways in which you, as counselors, can help. I thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wilson. We have come to the end of our plenary session. It has been very inspirational. There's an abundance of knowledge. Now we need to distill it in the workshops.
Thank you.